The principal facilitator is Eric Cook. Eric Cook is our round in progress, and he works with Sandia National Laboratories, United States of America. Eric Cook is a principal figure in shipping training. He has designed courses in Biorisk management, and even, I'm sure, is part of the designing of this shipping course. So I call him a guru in shipping, apart from Biorisk management. So I welcome you, and I will shortly be handing you over to Dr. Eric Cook, who is already on standby. This class is starting mainly because at this time, considering the difference in time zone between Lagos and New Mexico, where Eric Cook will be joining us from. The class will start now, and we run from now till 5 p.m. with a 30-minute break for our lunch at about 2 p.m. So I will want to join us to participate fully in the class, be active, and yet be cooperative with everyone in the class. Eric Cook is going to lead the class and will join us shortly. Eric, can you come on, please?
Yes, thank you, Professor. It's my pleasure to be with you. I was really hoping to be in Nigeria and join you for this conference and to be able to teach this workshop live. But unfortunately, with the circumstances with COVID, we were not able to get authorization or approval to travel. As Abiodun said, I have been teaching infectious substance shipping courses for since 1997. So it's been 25 years, and I've taught hundreds, if not thousands, probably more like thousands of shipping courses. And I am the biosafety officer for Sandia National Laboratories. And I'm also, I also manage all of the work that Sandia does in Nigeria. And I've been the Nigeria portfolio or country manager since 2014. And I've had an opportunity to travel to Nigeria many times, and I've trained many of the people there. And if I could just take a minute to go around and have each of you quickly introduce yourself. Just tell me your name, where you work, and a little bit about your experience, maybe with shipping. How often do you ship? What types of materials do you ship? Well, very briefly, and if you've had any infectious substance shipping training before. So can we go around the room? And I'm going to have Dr. Ularamu and Dr. Easter help with this. So if we can go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. And it's muted. I can't hear anything, so.
Oh yeah, speak now.
Hello?
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, you can see me live. I'm Ularamu Husseini, one of the co-facilitators here in this meeting for the shipment of dangerous food. Thank you. Hand over to Mr.
Hello, Eric.
Hi.
Nice to hear. Mr. Walker, one of the co-facilitators. Thank you.
Hey, Eric, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Austin Abba from the University of Port Harcourt. I'm a medical lab scientist. I also teach, so I need to explain some things to students concerning this infectious bacterial treatment and all that. What it entails. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stanley. I'm a medical lab scientist and a member of NiBSA. I've come to gain knowledge on shipping infectious substances and biological specimens.
Good morning, sir. I'm Charles I'm a laboratory manager. I work with Laboratories University teaching hospital in Sokoto, as well as the Laboratories University Faculty of Medical Laboratory Science. I deal with several biological samples, specimens. I also teach students how to learn knowledge concerning shipping of biological samples.
Hello, good afternoon, Eric from Nigeria. My name is Comfort Chalbandi. I'm a medical laboratory scientist, teaching and working in the hospital in the Federal Polytechnic, Mumbai, Adamawa State. I'm interested in shipping of infectious materials because I deal with them and I teach to students.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Vivian Adi. I'm a medical lab scientist. I'm also a lecturer at River State University in Port Harcourt. I'm a participant and I've come to get knowledge.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Will. I'm the lab scientist. I teach in
Good afternoon. My name is Iko Abiodun. I'm a medical lab scientist from Laboratories University teaching on Mitigation. I'm here to acquire knowledge on shipping.
Hi, Eric. This guy is Sandia.
Hi, Jay. It's been a while.
I'm a trainer. I just want to acquire more knowledge on shipping because I train students on how to take up their samples and transport them from one place to another. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Eric. My name is Dr. Wilson Bertu, working with National Business Research Institute. I'm involved in sample transportation because we collect samples from various states to the National Business Institution for the Netherlands, and therefore I'm interested in training in shipping.
Afternoon, Eric. I'm Jerome Majewali, a lab scientist from the University of University. I'm here to learn more on the shipping of infectious materials.
Hello, good morning. My name is Dr. Collins Sandia from Delta State. I work with the Hospital Management Board and I handle a lot of medical specimens. I want to gain knowledge more about that.
Good afternoon, Dr. Eric and the President. It's very Michael on the line. I'm interested in learning more on shipping because I'm going to be involved in transporting or shipping of DNA samples for sequencing very soon in my analysis. So I need to know more about it. Thank you.
My name is Musa Abubakar, environmental officer and surveillance officer regulation. I want to learn shipping infectious substances because of environmental samples and the samples that we are taking from the laboratory water states. So I want to learn more about the.
My name is Eddie Mathias. I'm here to learn shipping.
Hello, Eric. My name is Dr. Adora. I'm a biomedical scientist. I work with infectious microbiological agents. I want to know how to I want to get more knowledge on shipping them and how to handle them. Thank you for listening.
My name is Iko and Iata. I'm a medical scientist. I want to have more knowledge.
I am Dr. Gordon Resma. I work with Port Harcourt Reference Laboratory. I want to improve my knowledge on shipping of infectious substances.
Good morning, Eric. I am Dr. Iko and Iata. I teach university to university and I manage the laboratory. So I'm here to gain more knowledge on how to handle infections.
Thank you, Eric. We are done. Introduction.
All right, thank you. And welcome everyone. So just to give you a little taste, I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me okay. But if you can't, we also have Dr. Easter Nwoka and Uluramu Husseini and Abiodun Dinloye will be coming soon. And all three of these, I've had the pleasure of training as infectious substance shipping trainers. And so if we lose power or if something happens, I'm sure they'll be able to lead some discussions and take over for me. So we've kind of introduced ourselves and the students. I want to talk about some of the key messages for our training. This is going to be 2 sessions. We'll have approximately 4.5 hours of training today and 4.5 hours of training tomorrow. And so we'll in that time, we're going to cover all the regulations that affect shipping. We're going to talk about classification, which is determining so they divide infectious substances up into 2 categories, category A and B. Category A are the really high risk infectious substances that require special packaging, marking, and labeling. And then category B are the lower risk and are not as rigorous as far as the requirements for packaging and documentation. And then, so we're going to talk about risk assessment as it relates to infectious substance shipping and how to determine risk. We'll talk about one thing to note is every dangerous good has a proper shipping name. These names are standard throughout the world, so everyone uses the same terminology to avoid confusion. Every dangerous good also has a packing instruction. So we're going to go over the detailed packing instructions for category A and category B. And then we'll talk about marking and labeling and the 6 key things that have to be marked and labeled on the outside of the package. We'll also talk about overpacks. Overpacks are used when you have multiple packages that you have to ship to the same location. And we'll talk about what overpacks are and how they can be marked and labeled. We'll cover paperwork. Specifically, one of the key documents we'll look at is the Shipper's Declaration for Dangerous Goods, which is a legal document that's required for all Category A shipments, particularly if those shipments are going by air and internationally. And if there's time, we'll cover some of the security requirements and security considerations, particularly for the high-risk shipments. And then we'll cover international shipping requirements and import and export rules, and perhaps some of the country-specific requirements that might come up if you're shipping to Europe or the US. So one of the things that I hope many of you are familiar with is this biorisk management model called the AMP model for biorisk management. And it's a simple model. It's represented here by this chair. And you can see the chair has 3 legs. And I like the symbol of a stool here, because if you take away any one of those legs, the stool cannot stand. And so in any biorisk management element or model or system, you have to have these three elements. And even with shipping, when we ship infectious substances and we want to manage our risks associated with shipping, we need to look at assessment, mitigation, and performance. So I hope this is just review for most of you, but assessment is the process of identifying hazards and evaluating the risks. And we're going to spend some time talking about the assessment of the risks in shipping. And then biorisk mitigation. This is all the control measures that we put into place to reduce or eliminate risk. So everything that we do to reduce risk associated with shipping is considered mitigation. So things like packaging and marking and labeling and documentation, and all of that are ways that we can, are methods that we can use to mitigate or reduce risk. And then performance. This is what we do to check to make sure the system is working. Includes things like recording, measuring, evaluating, inspecting, double checking our work, reviewing the content, and preparing emergency response plans and things like that are all ways that we can assess our performance and ensure that our mitigation is working appropriately. So I'd like to start out with a quick group exercise, and I'm going to have Ularamu and Easter help with this. So if you can get in groups of, say, about 3 people, 2 to 3 people, and you should have sticky notes, I hope. And I want you to list at least 5 things. So I'm going to tell you a story about this particular shipment. This package here that I'm circling, this picture actually, this is a real picture that I got from a colleague at the US CDC. And I asked the colleague to send me some pictures of maybe accidents or incidents that they had involving shipping. And she sent me this picture. Well, she sent me several pictures, but I chose this one. And I don't know the real story behind this shipment, but I'm going to make up a story. And so in this case, inside this brown envelope here, they had placed 2 glass vacutainer test tubes of blood. And these samples had come from a patient with HIV. And the person who prepared this package just used an envelope. So this brown envelope that we see here, this was an envelope that she found around the laboratory. And on the outside of the envelope, it was pre-marked with this orange label that says, refrigerate on arrival, blood bank reagent. Now, obviously, this was not a blood bank reagent. This was an HIV test, but she had used just this envelope that was sitting it was just some supplies that were in the lab. And she had placed this envelope. So the vacutainers had gone inside this envelope. And then she had placed this envelope inside another envelope. That's this overnight courier pouch. And somewhere along the way, the package had gotten damaged and the blood leaked out. And there was a courier. We'll call the courier, we'll say his name was Bob. Okay, so Bob, he sees this package, has no idea what's in it. It's just a normal courier pack, but he sees this red liquid and he picks it up, and he realizes that maybe he was contaminated with this liquid. He didn't know what it was, and he delivered the envelope. Well, a week later, Bob gets a call from the laboratory, and they recommended to Bob that maybe he should go for HIV testing because of his exposure. So what I want you to do is in your groups, get in groups of about three people. And I want you to list at least 5 things that could have been done or should have been done to prevent Bob's exposure to HIV. And I want you to list each item on a sticky note. And I'm going to have Uluramu and Easter walk around and help if you need any questions or anything like that. And Easter, can you create a poster maybe at the front? Do you have flip charts? I hope you have flip charts, but create a poster, and I want you to write on that poster what went wrong. And I want you to write that right at the top of the poster, and we're going to collect people's sticky notes and we'll put them up on the poster. I know it says 10 minutes, but we're a little late, so I'm going to make this 5 minutes. Okay, so 5 minutes, and I'll let you guys get started.
All right, please, let's have a group of 3. Let's have a group of 3 people. So 1, 2, 3 is the first group. Right here. All right. So please, let's have a group of 3 people. 3 per group. I will provide a flip chart so that you will actually list at least 5 things that should have been done to prevent this incident. Each group will come in 5 minutes, please. And each group will begin to share what they have written down. Please, you can use your notebook, please. We are still awaiting the flip chart. You can use use your notebook before we have the speaking of the please look at the picture very well. Look at the picture and the damage that is on the picture and critically observe that picture. You have 5 minutes. 3 minutes remaining. You have 3 minutes remaining.
Yes.
How are we doing? Do we need another minute, or is everyone finished? Do we have at least 5? Do you guys, have you written down at least 5 things that could have been done to prevent that? What do you think, Ularamu and Easter? Have they written 5 things down at least, each group?
We are waiting the speaking on what we improvise using the notebook. And we'll go on the group that are ready to make their presentation now.
Okay, let's do this. I'm going to, let's see. I will I want to write down, let's see. I think I have it. Here it is. All right, so yeah, so I'm going to record the information as they read it off. So let's go one group at a time and have group 1 give me one thing that could have been done, and then group 2 give me another thing, and then group 3, and we'll just go around from group to group until we've listed everything that could have been done to prevent this.
All right, group 1, please make your presentation on the packaging. What went wrong? Please, group 1. Group 2. Yes. Group 3. Group 4.
Group 1, under there is no proper packaging because that specimen should have been packaged inside. There should be an inner container and there should be an outer container also.
Okay, all right. So I wrote inner container, outer container. Okay, good. All right, let's hear from group 2, another one.
Yes, there was no absorbent material present in the package.
Sorry, no absorbent. Did you say absorbent material?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, yeah, so we needed absorbent.
The cotton pages are not well cut. They are not well cut. The containment, the packaging is faulty. They are not well cut. They are not well cut.
So I'm not sure I understand. It wasn't cut?
Well cut.
CAPPED.
Oh, yes, yes, okay. Yeah. I'll write this down. I'll say sealed primaries.
The primary container should have been a leak-proof container.
Yes.
Or the use of the screw cap bottle would have sufficed. Leak-proof.
Yep, leak-proof container, and yes.
Like a screw cap bottle.
Okay, so in this case, they were vacutainers with the rubber stoppers. And so sometimes those rubber stoppers on an airplane, because of the change in pressure, can actually pop off. And so, yeah, a screw cap would have been better. Or if they had used like tape, like a little bit of tape or parafilm. You guys know parafilm? Yeah. Okay, so let me put that down. Leak-proof container, tape, or parafilm to seal the primary. All right, anything else related to the packaging?
Eric,
Yes, can you hear me?
can you change the color of the color of your marker?
Yeah, I'll try. Let me see.
You can change to blue or
Yeah, red is okay.
Okay. All right, we'll use red. Okay, so we need glass. Don't use glass.
The last group will.
All right.
Yes, it's still on packaging.
Okay, so we can also talk about marking, labeling, documentation, training, anything else. What else could have been done to prevent this?
No proper labeling, no delivery notes, no hazardous code, no trained personnel to receive the specimen.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, you didn't get it. Okay, so repeat that, please.
No triple packaging.
Yep.
No proper labeling. No delivery notes and documentation.
All right, no labels to indicate the hazard.
Yes. No hazardous codes. No hazardous label or codes.
No codes. Sorry. I didn't catch that. No codes?
Yes, codes or signs. No codes. CODES.
Yep. Codes. Good. So a code we use is called like a UN 2814, which is a code for infectious substance category A.
There's no trained personnel to receive the specimen.
So yeah, so we had no trained personnel. So maybe Bob wasn't trained. So we have to make sure we have training for the carrier, but we also need, more importantly, training for the shipper. So the shipper is the person who prepares the package.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Eric. All the groups have responded.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So one of the things, if we had some paperwork accompanying this shipment, had there been paperwork like a documentation, there was no documentation. There was no way for Bob to know. So documentation might have helped Bob know that it was dangerous. And like sometimes even having emergency response, there was no phone number to call for spill or emergency. So it would have been nice had there been a phone number on the outside of the package to let Bob know, hey, if this is leaking, call this number. All right. We could have used a biohazard sign. Something to let Bob know if he had seen a biohazard sign on the outside, maybe he would not have touched it. All right, good. So when we talk about preventing or shipping, these are the key things that we look at when it comes to mitigating the risk: the packaging, the marking, labeling, the documentation, and the training. And I wanted to just give you an overview of what we're going to focus on over the next several hours. Okay. All right, I'm going to skip this exercise just in the interest of time. But when you think about the different types of biological materials that we ship, we could ship cultures. We might ship blood, body fluid, tissues, patient specimens. They could be animal specimens. They could be human specimens. There are all kinds of human specimens, everything from fixed tissues to maybe stool samples, large volumes, or it could be blood, even very small volumes of blood, such as DBS. That's a little drop of blood on a tissue paper, and so we ship all kinds of biological materials, vaccines, biological products, and all kinds of things. All right, so when we think about where biological materials come and go and how they're transported, I'm going to skip this exercise also in the interest of time, but I want to talk about some key terminology. So there are these two words, transport and shipping. So transport is simply moving a sample from one location to another. So you can transport a sample from one laboratory in a building to another laboratory in the same building. So transport is just moving a sample from one place to another, whereas shipping includes transport, so the movement from one point to another, but all the other elements of the shipping process. So packaging, marking, labeling, documentation, import, export, chain of custody, moving, delivering, receiving. So shipping includes all of transport and much more. Another thing with shipping is typically shipping involves moving a sample from a secure, contained laboratory into the public sphere. So it's going outside of a controlled area and usually entering the public roadways, or it's in the environment outside of a controlled area. So that involves shipping. Ship means to offer or cause material to be transported outside of a restricted or controlled area. And then a shipper is an entity, so it could be a person, or it could be a laboratory or an institute or an employer who offers or causes a dangerous good to be transported outside of a restricted area. So the shipper could be a person, or it could be an institution. So a shipment, so another term here is a shipment is a movement of a biological material outside of a restricted area. And so, and then transport is simply moving it from A to B. So transport, for example, maybe this is my restricted area right here. So maybe this is the university campus, or it is the institute, and you might have several buildings at the institute, and you might transport a sample from one building to another building. So that would be transport. But a shipment occurs when it's moved from one restricted area to another restricted area. And so that's a shipment or shipping. And that involves, once you leave a restricted area, it has requirements for packaging, marking, labeling, documentation, and all of the steps that go with the shipping process. So when we think about shipping, shipping regulations, it really starts, we can think of shipping regulations that come, there are international bodies that write shipping regulations. So for example, we have the United Nations and ICAO. And so I'm going to talk about these two in just a minute. So you might have international regulations. There are some what are called regional regulations. So for example, the European Union has a regional agreement for how dangerous goods must be transported within member states. And then you might have national regulations. So for example, the US has its own regulations for the transport of dangerous goods. Canada has their own regulations. South Africa has their regulations. Many countries have their own national rules for how dangerous goods are transported within their country. We also have industry representative regulations. So for example, IATA is the International Air Transportation Association, and they represent the airline industry. And so for their members, so for their industry, they publish their own dangerous goods regulations. We also have various postal regulations. So if you're shipping dangerous goods through the postal system. And one thing we need to recognize is that there may be different requirements when you're shipping dangerous goods by air, by road, by rail, or by sea or maritime. And so there are modal variations and different requirements for the various modes. And also different carriers might have their own special requirements. We call these operator variations. And these operator variations are typically variations to the regulations that are specific for a particular airline or air carrier, such as FedEx will have their own specific requirements, as well as Air France, Delta, and others. And so when you look at all of this, there are a lot of regulations that are out there. And most regulations, they're based on the UN. So the UN, the United Nations, they have a committee of experts, the COE, that stands for Committee of Experts. And the UN, they publish every 2 years, they have representative experts from each country come, and they have a discussion, and they develop their international recommendations or regulations for the transport of dangerous goods. And within the UN, there is a group called ICAO. So ICAO is the International Civil Aviation Organization. And you might be familiar with WHO. So WHO is the World Health Organization, and the WHO is a sister organization to ICAO. They're both United Nations organizations. But ICAO, well, the World Health Organization is concerned about international health regulations and regulating health matters. ICAO is responsible for international civil aviation requirements. And so what ICAO does is ICAO takes these broad UN recommendations. Now the UN recommendations cover all the modes, air, road, rail, and sea, or they're kind of just general regulations. But what ICAO does is ICAO takes these general UN recommendations and they make them more restrictive and they make them specific for air transport. So think about transporting flammable liquids such as gasoline. or I guess in Nigeria, you call it petrol. So if you're transporting petrol on the road, you might be able to ship a large volume of petrol in a tanker truck. And there's going to be rules and requirements and marking and placarding and things that go on the truck and other requirements for transporting flammable liquids. But when it comes to air transport, flammable liquids are going to be much more restricted. So if you want to transport petrol by, let's say you want to transport a large volume of petrol, you would be limited by the amount that you're allowed to ship. And there's different packaging, more restrictive packaging requirements, marking and labeling requirements. So the air, of necessity, the air transport rules are much more restrictive than, say, the road, rail, or sea modes. So that brings us to the next set of regulations, and that is IATA. So IATA is the International Air Transportation Association, and they represent the air industry, and most of the world's major airlines are members of IATA. And so what IATA does is IATA takes these ICAO recommendations and they make them, they basically copy them word for word. And the IATA regulations are much more restrictive. So what you end up with is generally the most restrictive set of regulations. They incorporate all of the UN requirements and they add even additional restrictions. So we like to teach, when we teach, we like to teach from IATA because they're generally the most restrictive, it means they're the most universal. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So just as a summary, kind of the difference between ICAO and IATA is that ICAO, both are international, but one represents the industry. So for example, IATA, the members are airlines, and for ICAO, the members are countries. So one represents the industry and the other represents the kind of international law. Most countries, including probably Nigeria, will recognize ICAO as the authority for regulations. So they actually, because ICAO is an international rulemaking body, they're kind of quasi-governmental. They are recognized as the legal authority in many countries, including the US. The US sees the ICAO regulations as binding legal requirements for air transport in the US. So IATA, while IATA is not a law or rulemaking body, because most airlines are members of IATA, if our shipments do not comply with IATA regulations, then they will not be allowed to be transported by air, by the airlines themselves. They will not accept shipments that are not compliant with the IATA dangerous goods regulations. All right. So let me pause there and just see, are there any questions on regulations? So if we go back, I just want to point out that I'm not aware of any Nigerian regulations for dangerous goods transport. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Nigeria does not have, do not have laws or regulations for transporting infectious substances, or do they? Can somebody tell me?
Yeah, we do, because basically the issue of the import and export permit, you must actually have the import and export permit before you do your shipment.
Okay, so there are some rules for import and export, but if you're transporting infectious substances from VOM to Abuja, and you're driving on the road with your infectious substance, is it regulated by the Nigerian authorities? Are there rules for local transport of dangerous goods in Nigeria?
That we don't have, Eric. We actually have maybe a business transaction between you as a shipper with the person transporting it. And for there is no legal document as to shipment intrastate or within facilities.
Okay, and so what my recommendation is, if you don't have local laws, even if it's a ground shipment, to follow the IATA regulations, because we know if we follow the IATA rules, we know that it's legal in any country you ship it to. We know it's safe, and it's compliant with all international requirements. And so we're going to focus our training, I think, on the IATA regulations. And I just want to see, did everyone get a copy of the WHO guidance document? And I'll show you what that looks like. Let's see, where is it? Sorry. So I emailed this. Do you guys have a copy of this? Do the students have a copy of this at Ularamu?
We don't have the document now, but I think we can actually ask them to print the document.
Okay, so this is the WHO, this is published by the World Health Organization. And I sent a copy of this to Abiodun. So he has this. It would be nice if you could print some of these for each student, or at least send them a copy through the email. This document published by the WHO, and I want to point out that this is just guidance on the regulations. So it's not actual regulations, but it's guidance. And so I think these WHO guidance, they follow all of the requirements of ICAO, because WHO is a sister organization of ICAO. They have summarized the ICAO regulations in here. But this document has all of the key information on regulations, on national regulations, on variations. It covers training, who needs to be trained, what they need to be trained in. It talks about, here we have the definitions. We're going to go through these definitions in detail in a bit. And it has all of the, let me scroll down, packaging requirements. So here it talks about the basic triple package, what needs to be in a basic triple package. It has the specific requirements for category A and category B for packaging. And there's your category B package. This is your category A package. And it has some of the other references, the marking and labeling requirements. And then it also talks about the shipper's declaration, what needs to be on that. And it has some appendices, some key links. So here's some links to key references. And it also provides this list. So we're going to look at this indicative list a little bit later. Of these are organisms that are considered high risk or category A. And it also has the detailed packing instructions here. And then I've also included, so this is actually, these pages are, we put in there, this is information that Sandia amended to the WHO document, but it has a bunch of checklists, reference tables. It's got category A checklist, a category B checklist. It's got a marking and labeling checklist, a shipper's declaration checklist, and then we have some example shipper's declarations are also included to show you some ideas on how to properly complete different types of shipper's declarations. So that is the WHO guidance, and that's going to be our main reference. So the IATA regulations, this book, this costs, oh, I don't know, I think it's $300 to purchase. And there's a new version that comes out every year. So I think this is generally, you know, I have a copy of this, I get a new copy every year, but this might not be affordable for most laboratories to purchase this every year. And so having that WHO guidance document is a good option. And the WHO guidance document is freely available and it's published every 2 years. Okay. Any questions on regulations before I move on?
Please, can you send the WHO document to our email so that we can escalate it to the student later on their email?
Yes. So I'm going to, if you can ask Abiodun, I sent it to him. And so Abiodun should be able to share that document with everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Please. No, let's start with what?
A little more clarification on the ICAO and that of IATA. We gave about four specific duties of each. And that last one, a country that is not registered, will it be part of it? Or is there any modality for new countries to join? Did you get that?
Yeah, sorry, it's difficult to hear. Can you repeat the question?
ICAO.
Yep, ICAO.
And IATA.
Yep, IATA.
That's airline. Then these countries that are not part of it, how do they join to allow countries to submit variations if they need to join?
Okay, yeah. So the countries have to join. So ICAO is actually, there's only one country in the world that is not a member of ICAO. And that country is somewhere in Europe. And the reason why they're not a member of ICAO is because they don't have any airports. And so they decided not to join ICAO because they don't need, I think it's a very small country, maybe Luxembourg or something like that, is the only country that's in the world that is not a member of ICAO. And so most countries, they're allowed to submit variations. And I'm not aware, so most of those variations that are submitted to ICAO are also the same variations that are in IATA. And so those variations, it kind of depends on the countries. We'll talk a little bit about some of the key variations that apply to infectious substance shipping. There is one variation that many countries, particularly in Europe and the US, they have a requirement for a 24-hour emergency response telephone number. And we'll talk about that variation tomorrow, But as far as infectious substances go, there are very few variations. There's only a few key variations that we'll talk about later for infectious substances. Does that answer your question?
A country like Afghanistan.
Yep.
Now that they have done their own self-determination and they're doing their business their way, is there any way we can monitor what they are doing there?
Yeah. So the variations are printed at the back of the ICAO book. It's a thick book, and the variations are published in an appendix there. And then if there is a particular, I should have grabbed my IATA books upstairs. I should have grabbed that before I started. I'll get it during a break. But I wanted to mention that the IATA book the IATA regulations, they have a section on variations, and you can look those up. There are two types of variations. There are variations by the countries, but there are also variations by the airlines themselves. And so whenever there's a variation, it's listed by number. So the variations are given a number, like, for example, there's one called FX12, and FX12 is the FedEx's 12th variation. And so FedEx has 12 different variations or maybe more, but FX12 is an important one for us because that FedEx variation says that if you use FedEx, you cannot handwrite or print your shipper's declarations. You have to use FedEx software. It's a special software that you have to use to prepare your shipper's declarations. So those are some examples of variations. We'll talk more about variations tomorrow if there's time. Okay, good. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
No questions. No more questions, please.
Okay. All right, let's go on. So from the regulations, IATA, this is from IATA, they define dangerous goods. They use two definitions for dangerous goods. One is articles or substances which are capable of posing a risk to health, safety, property, or the environment. And then another is that they're those goods which meet the criteria of one or more of the 9 UN hazard classes. And so all dangerous goods can be divided up into 9 classes. And each of these classes have specific criteria that qualify a good or a material under one of those classes. So these are the 9 classes. We have explosives, we've got compressed gases, flammable liquids, flammable solids, oxidizers. Class 6 are substances that affect health. And then radioactive material, corrosive material. And then if it's still dangerous, if it's something that's dangerous, but it's not explosive, flammable, toxic, radioactive, or corrosive, or an oxidizer, then they put it in the miscellaneous category, which is class 9. And so for us, the key class that we're looking at is class 6. And within class 6, there are 2 divisions. So these are classes, and then within the classes, you have divisions. So 6.1, that's a class 6 division 1, or they just call it division 6.1, are toxic substances. So things like poisons, pesticides, and others. And then division 6.2 are infectious substances. So it's important to note that within these divisions, so there are specific criteria that qualify something as toxic, or specific criteria that qualify something as infectious. So let's look at that next. Before I go on, I just want to do a quick comprehension check. So which of the following terms describes physically moving a dangerous good from one point to another? So I want you guys just to write down on a piece of paper, just write down your answer. So which of the following terms describe physically moving a dangerous good from one point to another? First one. All right, let's see what the answer is. The correct answer is C. It's not shipping. So hopefully, so you guys, so C, transport is moving it from one point to another. So I could move it from one room to another room, that's transport. Shipping involves transport. So transport is one step of shipping, but shipping is much more than just transport. Shipping includes packaging, marking, labeling, documentation, import, export, and all of the steps, offering it, receiving it, moving it, and then receiving it at the final destination. So there's a lot more to shipping than just transport. All right, let's try another one. What is the difference between IATA and ICAO? So I want you to choose the best answer. So one covers ground transport, the other covers air. B, ICAO is recognized as an international lawmaking body, whereas IATA is an industry standard protecting the air industry. IATA is international and ICAO is only regional, and ICAO is more restrictive than IATA. So what is the best answer? I'll give you guys a minute to write it down. I'm hearing B. B. Okay, let's take a look at that. So that is correct. B is correct. So in this case, they both cover air. So that one's wrong. IATA, they're both international. So that one's wrong. And then IATA is more restrictive than ICAO, not the other way around. So if we switched these two terms, it would be correct. All right. So so next I want to talk about the 7 steps to shipping dangerous goods. So these are the basic, I call these the basic 7 steps. And I call them basic because there's a lot of different steps or ways you could look at transport. But these are the basic 7 steps, or sorry, not transport, shipping. In this case, I should say maybe not shipping in total, but these are the 7 steps to preparing a shipment to be shipped. So these 7 steps, the first step is to classify. And what we mean by classify is determine whether something is infectious or not. And if it is infectious, to determine whether it's high risk category A or moderate to low risk category B. The second step is to identify. And what we mean by identify is to select a proper shipping name. Step 3 is to select the packaging. Step 4 is to pack. Step 5 is to mark and label. 6 is to prepare the documentation. And then 7 is to make arrangements. So making arrangements includes making sure you have any necessary permits, import and export requirements, notifying the receiver that you're sending it and when to expect it, and then making arrangements for any security if there are security concerns. And so for the rest of today, so today we're going to try to get through in the next couple hours. We'll try to get through step 1 and 2. We might be able to get to step 3 by the end of today. And then tomorrow we're going to focus on the packaging, marking, labeling, and documentation, and making arrangements. So we'll try to get through the introduction to packaging today. All right. So I had mentioned before this idea of assessment. And so when we look at the 7 steps to shipping, these first 2 steps, this is our assessment. The first 2 steps in the shipping process are assessment. And then these are going to be our mitigation. So here we have our A, we have our M, and then the making arrangements and preparation. This is going to be part of our performance. There are other things that are going to be involved in performance, but these are the basic AMP model for shipping. And so we're going to start with risk assessment. So maybe this might be a review for many of you if you've been through kind of basic training from Sandia or from NiBSA. When we talk about risk, so risks, what is risk? So risk is the likelihood of some undesirable event. So risk is kind of a measurement. So we're measuring the likelihood of something bad happening that involves a specific hazard or threat. So the hazard or threat is the thing that can harm us. So in shipping, the hazard would be the container itself, or the agent, the biohazardous agent. And there are kind of 2 components when it comes to risk. There's the likelihood of something bad happening, but then there's also the consequences if it did happen. So when we look at consequences are so we could measure the probability of something happening, but we also could measure, if it did happen, what would be the severity. So we have both probability and we have severity, and these 2 factors we can look at, and that can help us determine what our risk is. So we could have something that has maybe a relatively low likelihood, but something that has a very high consequence might put us in a higher risk category. So risk is a function of both the likelihood and the consequences of something bad. So I'm going to pause here, and I want you guys to get in groups of 3 or 4 people. And I want you to see if you can come up with, I'll give you 5 minutes, and I want you to come up with 3 to 5 risks. So what I mean by risks are, and I'm going to put this maybe an additional kind of text to this, our risks are bad things that can happen. So ideally, we would not transport or ship infectious material outside of our laboratory. We want to keep it contained within the laboratory. But for many reasons, we may need to ship our samples to another laboratory. Maybe they have better equipment to do the testing, or perhaps we have to ship it for verification to verify our work, or maybe for research purposes, we may want to ship some samples to a collaborator or something of that nature. When we ship things, bad things can happen. So I want you to think about what are some of those bad things that can happen when you ship, and just list them down and see if you can come up with, say, 3 to 5. Once you have 3, raise your hand. And Ularamu, can you let me know when each group has at least 3 to 5? If they can come up with 5, that would be great. So I'll give you 5 minutes, but maybe you can finish early. Raise your hand. And then Ularamu, can you let me know when we're ready to begin again?
So maintaining the sample, please can we take 5 minutes to do the next slide? Yeah. 5 minutes. Only to your group. Okay. So group one, are you ready?
Yes, group one. Spill, possibility of spill, contamination, misplacement, infection, mutilation.
There's risk of theft. Security risk. Risk of theft. Yeah, theft.
All right, risk of theft. Next group.
Misplacement.
Placement. Next group.
Spillage or leakage.
Spillage or leakage. Biocrisis.
Misdirection of shipment to an undesirable destination.
So, misdirecting shipment.
All right, one of these, there are leakages. One is speed, and we speed, and just like the scientific, and then I'm very, very dangerous. Meanwhile, I'm Mr. Marcus.
Infection during the shipping process.
Biosecurity risk. Biosecurity risk. Stolen package, yeah.
So we have exhausted all the answers from the various groups.
Okay, did I capture everything? Am I missing something? So I got infection to carrier, spill or leak, contamination to the environment, misplaced or lost package, infection, exposure to receiver, a stolen package. What, is there anything I missed? All right, how about, I'm gonna add one more. How about poor results or a loss of, so poor results. So let's say you wanna do a, let's say there's, you wanna do, you're doing COVID testing and you have one tube that came from a person with that was positive, and you have maybe 10 tubes in there. 9 of them are negative, 1 is positive, but the positive one happened to leak and contaminate the other 9. And so you might have false positives, or you, let's say during the shipping process, you shipped it with the gel packs, but the gel packs were not sufficient to keep it cold. And so the temperature was too warm and the samples degraded, and you had negative results because of sample degradation, when really there was, they might've been positive. And so poor results, so that could be from cross-contamination or from temperature loss. Okay, so that could happen as well. Okay, so I think very good. We've come up with 7 specific risks, and you know the risks are not just we have both biosafety risks, we have biosecurity risks, but we also have quality control and quality assurance risks as well. And so there's a lot of different risks that we have to consider when it comes to shipping. And I'm glad you guys also remembered that it's not just the safety risks that we have to think about. All right, so let's choose one of these risks, and let's say for this next discussion, let's say our risk is spilled, or we'll call it leaking package, and exposure to carrier and environment. All right, so this is our specific risk. Let's focus on this risk where we won't, we'd look at different factors if it was biosecurity or if it was quality control, but let's just focus on a spilled or leaking package. And I want you to take a few minutes in your group, and I want you to come up with a, what factors contribute to the likelihood. So for example, if we think about the likelihood of a spill, well, how well is something packaged? The better it's packaged, the less likely it is to spill. And if it's poorly packaged, it's much more likely to spill. And so what are some of the critical factors that contribute to the likelihood of a spill? But then also think about what are some factors that determine the degree of the consequences. So for example, how virulent the pathogen is. So when you think about consequences, I always think about, let's say, when I try to think about risk and consequences, I think, okay, the consequences occur after the event has occurred. So if my event is a spilled or leaking package, what determines how bad that spill is? The degree of consequences if it did spill. And so spend, let's say, a few minutes, and I want you guys to come up with factors that determine the likelihood and consequences. And if you think about spills or leaks, if you have listed all the factors, then also think about what are the factors that determine the risk of theft. What increases or decreases the likelihood of theft? And then what increases or decreases the consequences if something was stolen? And then finally, you might want to also think about quality control, quality assurance, something like that. So think about all the different risks we talked about and list as many factors that contribute to that risk. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to talk about that. And then Uluramu, can you let me know? We're not going to collect those factors yet, but just write them down for now and we'll talk about them. Uluramu, let me know when you're ready to, when the groups have finished this discussion.
All right, thank you. So please, let's have 5 minutes for this exercise. Now we have provided the sticky notes and the marker. So please, on each of the sticky notes, you can write your answer then per group. We have 5 groups now. 5 groups. Each sticky note. Use the marker. Each sticky note, write the answer. Move any of the words close to you. Please use the sticky notes. You can write 1 or 2 on each list. Yes. 2 minutes remaining. Okay, please, group one, the first round is group one, you can make your presentation.
The likelihood, I think poor container is the material made of poor material, poor handling, poor packaging, poor transportation. Those are the likelihoods. Next.
Likely factors are the category of the infection, transport either category A or B, poor documentation, improper packaging, and training.
Okay, the violence or the pathogenicity of the substance transmission. There is poor packaging, the factor, and then the duration of exposure.
Yeah. So next group.
The infectious agents. That is volume.
Okay.
Another point we have here is if there is the likelihood of having an ulterior motive, then the specimen could be stolen. That's the consequence. Yes, it will be stolen. And then there is no documentation or no knowledge of where the specimen is going to, then it will be misplaced or taken lost or taken to a different direction.
Thank you. Any other additional information? All right.
Yes. He's still busy trying to.
Please use the mic. Please use the mic. Use the mic.
Poor capping. 2, more packaging. 3, broken seal. 4, wrong container. 5, the consequences. Number 1, number 1. Other consequences. Number 2, infection to the carrier and to the environment. Number 3, accidents result from spillage. If probably can be treated with yes, then contamination to the specimen. And they can affect the body, yes. Only the reduce. Thank you.
Thank you for all the answers. Eric, we are done with response from the participants. Please, over to you.
All right, thank you. So thank you for your answers. And I just, let's see. No, oh, shoot, where did I, hold on. I am missing something. Apologies. Let me just, where did that go? Ah, here it is. Okay, hold on. I have a slide in the wrong spot, so I just have to move it up. Okay. All right, so let's see. Okay, so now you have kind of your list, and you've come up with your list of factors that affect the shipment. So I want you to think about two different. Let's say we have two different scenarios. In one, you're shipping 1 milliliter of plasma collected from a patient suspected of HIV. And in the other shipment, so I have a test tube. Let's see, I wish I had two tests. So I have a test tube of HIV, or we're not sure, but that we suspect the patient has HIV, and I'm shipping 1 milliliter of plasma from that patient. And then I also have in another package 100 milliliters of a broth culture of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So do these two samples have the same risk for transport? What do you guys think? Yes or no?
No.
No, the risk is different, right? So I've got two packages. One has HIV plasma. The other has a culture of tuberculosis, a liquid culture. So what are the key factors that would determine the risk for these two biological materials? So if you could think, let's say they were packaged exactly the same. They both had the same packaging. But what are the 2 or 3 key differences between these two packages that would determine, so they're not the same risk. One maybe is a higher risk than the other. So what are the 2 or 3 key differences that determine the risk in this situation? So you guys listed a bunch of factors, but in this case, what are the factors, the 2 or 3 key factors or key differences between these two shipments that determine the risk? And let's say packaging is identical, marking and labeling is identical. What is it different about the actual samples themselves? So I'll give you just a minute and you guys tell me. And Uluramu, can you just once you have discussed it as a group, just tell me or what you guys decide are the 2 or maybe 3 key differences that you need to consider in the risk between these two. What are the 2 or 3 key differences? All right.
All right, get back to you. You will start with group 1.
two factors we are looking at: one, effective dose, and then two, mode of transmission.
Next group.
I said that the two factors we looked at are: one, effective dose, and then secondly, a mode of transmission.
Mode of transmission and effective. Yes.
The culture is confirmed and the other one is not confirmed. Then the volume of the one is 1 mil and the other one is 100 mil. And they get the suspected.
Okay, what we have here now is the route of infection, that's the route of transmission, and then the volume for the effective use of this specimen.
Rob, yeah, please respond.
We already have the volume, and then the type of container, and the mode of transportation.
What transportation? All right, thank you, Rob. Okay, mode of. So now back to you, Eric.
Okay, thank you. So what did we decide as the 2 or 3 key, like from the whole group, what would you guys select as the 2 or 3 key factors?
Mode of transmission, 1.
One group said mode of transmission. Next group.
So we have route of transmission. If we could just list the 3, the 3 top. So we have route of transmission. What else?
Of transmission, volume.
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 Okay.
Another group is talking about effective dose.
Dose. Okay. Let's say we'll say dose, or let's see. Dose. Okay. What's another one?
Another group. That's all.
All right. What about pathogenicity?
Yeah.
How about concentration?
Yeah, concentration of the virus.
Okay, so think about these 2. Which one has the highest concentration?
Mycobacterium.
Mycobacterium. Okay, so I'll put a little check mark there. Which one? All right, so think about route of transmission. We have a bloodborne and we have an airborne. Which is greater risk in transport? Airborne. So we'll give a check for tuberculosis. All right, so volume. Which one has the larger volume? The TB, right? What about infectivity or infective dose? What is the infective dose for TB? It's very low, isn't it? Yeah, HIV, you have to have a higher, usually has a higher dose than TB. And then which is more pathogenic, HIV or TB? What do you guys think? TB? All right. So yeah, so I think you guys came up with 5 important factors. I think for transport purposes, when they look at classifying or determining whether something is high risk, like category A or category B, they're going to look at the pathogenicity and the concentration. Those are the 2 key factors that determine whether something's category A or B. And then the other key factor, which is not as important, but is still reviewed, at least for shipping, is the volume or the amount of the material. So the volume will determine, there are certain quantity limits, and so certain volumes are not allowed on air transport. All right. So really the two key factors when we start looking at it are going to be the pathogenicity and the concentration that determine risk. Okay, so I've made a list here, and think about the list that you guys created for your factors. So these are all the factors that that I could think of that really determine the risk of a shipment. And I've highlighted in red right here, these are the three kind of key factors that are used in classifying, determine whether something is category A or category B. And if you notice, all of the rest of these, so triple packaging, absorbent, marking, labeling, training, inspection, disinfecting primaries and secondaries, avoiding contamination, strong, rigid, pressure tested, use of dry ice, good documentation. All of these factors affect the likelihood of something spilling, whereas these factors, if it did spill, these are the factors that will determine the consequences of an accident or spill. So for example, you'll see some things like absorbent might be listed for both, because absorbent, so the padding itself can protect or insulate something. So absorbent can prevent a breakage. So if a package is dropped or damaged, the absorbent can prevent the container from the primary from breaking. But if it did break, the absorbent is there to contain the leakage so it doesn't get out. Same thing with marking and labeling. So marking and labeling, if I see a mark or label on a package indicating it's biohazardous, that will maybe cause me to handle it a little more carefully, and that might prevent a leak. But if it was leaking or it had spilled, the marking and labeling will provide, will tell me, oh, I don't want to touch it. If I see it if I see a biohazard symbol on the package, I'm not going to handle it if I see that it might be leaking. Labeling also includes things like emergency response information. And so if it does leak, I know who to call and when to call and things like that. All right, so let's go on. Okay, so when we talk about key risk factors for shipping, we have these are maybe the key, most important factors that determine both the likelihood of a spill or leak, or if it did spill or leak, the consequences of that. And in this case, I've highlighted the red as those things that we don't have a lot of control over. So you can't control the infectivity or pathogenicity of the material being transported. Its pathogenicity is determined by its genetic makeup and the nature of the pathogen itself. So we have no control over the pathogenicity. We really can't control the amount of material being shipped. To some extent we can, but if we want to try to ship as small amount as possible, and then we can't really control the concentration. So when we talk about concentration of the material, usually we look at cultures versus patient specimens. Cultures are high concentration and patient specimens are low concentration in general. The things that are listed here in black are things that we have control over. So the type of packaging, how it's packaged, the training, the marking, labeling, and the communication of risk, including the documentation. These things are things that we can control. And so most of what we do as shippers is reduce the likelihood of an accident or a theft or a spill. It's the consequences, these things that determine the category. So whether it's category A or B. And we can't really, there's not a lot we can do to reduce the consequences, but we can do a lot to reduce the likelihood. So let's talk about that. It's actually 6:05 now. Before we get into the details of classification, let's take our lunch break now. So can we break for 30 minutes and try to be back here at, it'll be 2:35. Can you guys return at 2:35?
Yes, we will take the time, early 2:35 will be arrived in the class. Yes. So the key message is pathogenicity and concentration. These are very important in determining the category of the. So we very carefully writing an example because these are things that we can actually come up with. Emphasizing that they emphasis on it. So the attendance sheet is ongoing. Please write your name before going out. And there are manuals for the training. If you have duly registered, please come over and collect your manual. Okay.
Yes. So this Zoom meeting is going to be short down for 30 minutes. And then we'll back off in 30 minutes. That's 2:35. Thank you.